My thumb hovered over the send button, the blue arrow glowing softly in the dim light of my new office. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights sprawled out like a blanket of scattered diamonds, a world away from the cramped, musty apartment I used to share with her. My phone buzzed again. It was my ex-wife, Sarah. The screen showed a string of increasingly frantic messages. "Where are you? Answer me! My parents are asking about the money for the house." I took a slow, deliberate breath, savoring the silence and the cool, conditioned air. I read her last message one more time, a smile touching my lips for the first time in what felt like a decade. Then, I pressed send. The single, final text shot across the network, a digital arrow aimed directly at the heart of the life they had so carefully constructed at my expense. She thought she was leaving me with nothing, but she didn't understand that in taking everything, she had given me the one thing I never had: freedom. That text message wasn't just an explanation, it was a detonation. It contained a single screenshot and a 7-word sentence that would not only end our communication forever, but would also trigger the collapse of her family's entire world. They had built their kingdom on my back, celebrated their successes with my sweat, and bandaged their failures with my savings. They called me the reliable one, the boring one, the safety net. What they never realized was that a safety net, when pulled, can bring the whole circus crashing down. They believed their golden boy, my brother-in-law, was their ticket to the good life, while I was just the engine running quietly in the background, meant to be used and forgotten. How could a single text message unravel a family, bankrupt a business, and expose 2 decades of carefully hidden lies? Why did I wait until this exact moment, after she had filed for divorce and bragged to her friends about how she was finally getting rid of her deadweight husband? It's because revenge is a dish best served cold, and mine had been chilling for a very long time. To understand the devastation I had just unleashed, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to understand the family I married into, the role they assigned me, and the promise they made me break. A promise to the one person I should have protected above all others. It all began 20 years ago, not with malice, but with love. Or what I thought was love. When I met Sarah, she was everything. Bright, funny, and she seemed to see me in a way no one else had. My own parents had passed away in a car accident just a year before, leaving me with a modest inheritance and a profound sense of loneliness. Sarah filled that void. She was my anchor, and when she introduced me to her family, I thought I had found a new one. Her parents, David and Carol, welcomed me with wide smiles and firm handshakes. Her younger brother, Mark, was hailed as the family's rising star. He was about to start a business, a high-end construction company, and the dinner table conversations were always filled with his grand ambitions and brilliant plans. I was just a junior accountant at a mid-level firm, steady but unremarkable. They called me good old Alex, a solid choice for their daughter. The first hint of trouble came about 6 months into our marriage. Mark's brilliant business plan needed capital, more than the banks were willing to lend to a 20-something with no track record. That's when my inheritance came up. It wasn't a dramatic, confrontational request. It was subtle, manipulative, and expertly executed by Carol over a Sunday dinner. "Oh, Alex," she'd sighed, placing a hand on my arm. "It's such a shame that money from your parents is just sitting in a low-interest account. If only there were a way to make it work for the family. Your family now, you know." Sarah backed her up, her eyes wide and earnest. "Think about it, honey. It's an investment. Mark is going to be a millionaire. We'd all be set for life. It's for our future." That was the first crack in the promise I made to my dying mother. I can still see her in that sterile hospital bed, her voice a frail whisper. "Alex, this money is your start. Don't let anyone take it from you. Build your own life, be independent, promise me." I promised. But I was young, in love, and desperate for the family I had lost. I saw their proposal not as a betrayal of my past, but as an investment in my future, a future with Sarah. So, against my better judgment, against the ghost of my mother's warning, I agreed. I liquidated my parents' life savings, every last cent, and handed a check for $250,000 to my brother-in-law, a man I barely knew. It was presented as a loan, of course. A formal agreement was drafted, promising repayment with interest within 5 years. That contract, tucked away in a dusty file box for 2 decades, would become my salvation. The first 5 years came and went, and there was no mention of repayment. Mark's company, Prestige Homes, was supposedly doing well. We'd see pictures of his lavish company parties on social media, hear about the expensive new car he bought, or the designer suits his father now wore. Yet, whenever I cautiously brought up the loan to Sarah, the mood would sour instantly. "Alex, don't be like that," she'd say, her voice laced with disappointment. "You can't put that kind of pressure on him. It's a startup. All the profits have to be reinvested. It's for the family's future, remember?" Her parents echoed the sentiment. "Patience, Alex," her father would say with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Good things come to those who wait. You're not in a hurry, are you?" I was. We were living paycheck to paycheck. I took on a second job doing bookkeeping on weekends just so we could build a small emergency fund. We drove a 10-year-old sedan while Mark drove a new Lexus. We vacationed at a state park for 3 days while her parents and Mark flew to Hawaii for 2 weeks. My life became a long, grueling stretch of quiet sacrifice. I was the reliable foundation upon which their dreams were built. When their car broke down, good old Alex would use his weekend to fix it. When their taxes became too complicated, good old Alex, the accountant, would spend nights poring over their receipts for free. I was the family utility, always available, never complaining. The inheritance was a forbidden topic, a ghost at every family gathering. They talked about Mark's money and Mark's success, conveniently forgetting its origin. Sarah and I couldn't even afford a down payment on a small starter home, the very thing my parents' money was meant for. Instead, we stayed in our small rented apartment, the walls thin enough to hear our neighbors argue. Every time I looked at our strained budget, my mother's voice echoed in my head. "Build your own life." I was building a life, all right, just not my own. I was building one for them. The real turning point, the moment the fog of denial began to lift, was on our 10th anniversary. Sarah wanted to go to a nice restaurant, a place we couldn't really afford. I worked 3 straight weekends of overtime to save up for it. That evening, as we sat there, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother. She smiled as she read it, then showed it to me. It was a picture of her parents and Mark on a yacht, clinking champagne glasses, with the caption, "Celebrating 10 years of Prestige Homes to our brilliant boy." My blood ran cold. They weren't just celebrating Mark's company. They were celebrating the anniversary of me handing over my entire inheritance. It wasn't a shared success. It was their victory, and I wasn't even invited to the party. I was paying for it, literally, at another restaurant across town. The smile on Sarah's face wasn't one of shared joy. It was oblivious. She saw nothing wrong with it. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't a partner in this family. I was the Mark. That anniversary dinner changed everything. I stopped asking questions. I stopped complaining. On the outside, I became even more agreeable, more good old Alex than ever. I nodded along at family dinners, smiled at their stories of lavish spending, and continued to fix their problems. But on the inside, a quiet, cold fury had taken root. The accountant in me, the part of my brain that sees the world in numbers, balances, and evidence, took over. My grief for my lost family and my foolishness turned into a single sharp objective: find the truth. My weekends were no longer spent doing odd jobs for extra cash. They were spent in the quiet hum of the public library and the glow of my laptop screen late into the night, long after Sarah was asleep. I started digging. I began with public records, business filings, and property deeds. I was an accountant, after all. I knew where to look. The first bombshell dropped about a month into my secret investigation. I discovered that Prestige Homes wasn't a corporation or an LLC where I could be considered a shareholder or an early investor. It was a sole proprietorship, registered under one name and one name only, Mark's. Legally, I had no claim to a single penny of its profits. The investment they had sold me on was a legal fiction. My $250,000 hadn't been an investment in a company. It had been a personal gift to my brother-in-law. The loan agreement we signed was my only saving grace, but I knew if I brought it up, they would laugh me out of the room. They would call me greedy and ungrateful, and Sarah would take their side. The second bombshell was even more devastating. Using my accounting knowledge, I started tracing the flow of money. Mark was a terrible bookkeeper, arrogant and sloppy. He left a digital trail a mile wide. He was using the business account like a personal piggy bank, but he was also doing something much worse. He was running 2 sets of books, one for the tax authorities, showing minimal profits and high expenses, and another, I suspected, for himself. He was committing blatant tax fraud, channeling untaxed profits from the business into personal assets. He'd buy properties under his parents' names, who were both on modest pensions, then they would gift them back to him months later to launder the money. The new cars, the vacations, the designer clothes, it was all paid for with criminal proceeds. My inheritance wasn't just the seed money, it was the foundation of a criminal enterprise. I would look at Sarah sleeping next to me, and I wouldn't feel love anymore. I felt nothing but a cold, hollow space where my heart used to be. The question was no longer about getting my money back. It was about taking everything from them, using the very rules and laws they thought they were so cleverly breaking. But I couldn't move yet. I needed more. I needed irrefutable proof, and I needed the perfect moment to deploy it. The next 10 years were a masterclass in patience. I lived a double life. To Sarah and her family, I was the same man. Predictable, passive, a bit of a pushover, still plugging away at my dead-end accounting job. I let my car get a little rustier. I wore my clothes until they were frayed, and I never once hinted that I knew their secret. I was a ghost in my own marriage, a quiet observer at their celebrations, my face a carefully constructed mask of benign indifference. They grew comfortable with my silence, mistaking it for acceptance. They had no idea that while they were living it up on stolen money, I was building an empire in the shadows. My nights and weekends were no longer just for investigation. They were for construction. I started my own consulting firm, specializing in forensic accounting, the very skill I had honed by dissecting Mark's fraudulent empire. I took on clients who had been cheated in business deals, uncovering hidden assets and untangling complex webs of deceit. My work was anonymous and entirely remote. I built a reputation for being ruthless, meticulous, and effective. The money started coming in, first as a trickle, then as a flood. I didn't spend it. I invested it, building a portfolio that dwarfed my stolen inheritance. I opened new bank accounts that Sarah knew nothing about. I bought the office space, the one with the city view, through a shell corporation. I was becoming the man my mother always wanted me to be, powerful, independent, and self-made, and nobody knew. The final piece of the puzzle fell into my lap almost by accident. Mark, in his infinite arrogance, had bought his parents and Sarah new tablets for Christmas. To make things easier, he synced all their devices to a shared family cloud account, including the one on the old family computer in our apartment that I occasionally used for work. He must have forgotten about it. One night I logged on and found a treasure trove, their family group chat. For years they had used it as their private forum. I scrolled back, my heart pounding with a cold, methodical rhythm, and there it was, conversations making fun of my cheap clothes. Jokes about how my inheritance paid for their trip to Italy. Detailed discussions about which assets to keep in their parents' names to hide them from Snoopy Alex if I ever got suspicious. The worst was a message from Sarah to her mother just 6 months ago. "I don't know how much longer I can do this. He's just so bland. Mark is closing the deal on the lake house, and I'm stuck here with Mr. Safety Net. I think it's time to cash out." That was it. The final, undeniable proof. They didn't just take my money. They despised me for giving it. My patience had paid off. Now, all I had to do was wait for them to make the first move. I didn't have to wait long. About a month after I found the group chat, Sarah sat me down at our rickety kitchen table. She had that look on her face, a mixture of pity and resolve that people get when they're about to do something they think is for your own good. "Alex," she began, her voice smooth and rehearsed. "We need to talk. Us, it isn't working anymore. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. I need more. We've grown into different people." She delivered the lines flawlessly, probably practiced them with her mother for a week. She spoke of her need for excitement, for a partner who was her equal, all while avoiding my eyes. I just sat there, nodding slowly, my face an empty canvas. I didn't get angry. I didn't plead. I didn't even ask why. My silence unnerved her. "Well?" "Say something," she finally stammered. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. I saw a stranger whose features I just happened to know well. "Okay," I said. My simple agreement threw her off. She was prepared for a fight, for tears, for begging. She wasn't prepared for calm acceptance. Her family was the same. When we met with her lawyer, a slick, expensive man Mark had hired, they were all there for moral support. Mark stood with his arms crossed, a smug look on his face. Her parents looked at me with expressions of profound sympathy, as if they were watching a sick animal being put out of its misery. The lawyer laid out the terms. Sarah would be entitled to 50% of all marital assets. He then listed them off. Our joint savings account containing a little over $7,000, the blue book value of my 16-year-old car, and the assorted furniture in our apartment. The total value was laughably small. They were literally planning to split the cost of our used toaster. "This seems fair," I said, my voice even. The lawyer looked surprised. Mark smirked. Sarah looked relieved. They thought I was a defeated fool, too broken to fight for the scraps of a life I had built. I signed the initial papers without even reading the fine print. I knew what it said. It said they were taking half of everything they knew about. Over the next few weeks, they moved fast. They wanted the divorce finalized as quickly as possible. Mark was closing a huge deal to develop a luxury condo complex, and Sarah wanted to use her settlement money, combined with a hefty sum from her family, to buy a penthouse in the first building. It was to be their ultimate triumph, a monument to their success, built on my ashes. The day the divorce was finalized, I saw a post on Sarah's social media. It was a picture of her, Mark, and her parents, all holding champagne glasses. The caption read, "To new beginnings and cutting dead weight. Bar unburdened, bar future is bright." That was my cue. The trap was set. The bait was taken. It was time to pull the pin. The day after the divorce was final, I moved into my new office. I didn't even bother going back to the apartment to collect my half of the toaster. From my window, I could see the construction site for the new luxury condo building, a steel skeleton reaching for the sky. It was Mark's flagship project, the one he'd sunk every dollar of his company's capital into, along with massive loans. It was also where Sarah, my ex-wife, was planning to buy her penthouse. They were over-leveraged and exposed, exactly as I had anticipated. My first call was to my lawyer, a woman I had retained months ago, known for her tenacity in financial litigation. I gave her the green light. The next morning, a process server walked into the gleaming lobby of Prestige Homes and handed Mark a summons. I had filed a lawsuit for the repayment of the original loan. The principal was $250,000. But the contract they had so carelessly signed 20 years ago stipulated an 8% annual compound interest rate on the unpaid balance. After 2 decades, the total amount owed wasn't $250,000 anymore. It was just over $116 million. Sarah called me, screaming, "How could you do this? After everything? You're trying to ruin us," she shrieked into the phone. "I'm just collecting on a debt, Sarah," I replied calmly. "It's just business." Her father called next, bellowing threats about how their lawyer would bury me. Mark just sent a text. "You pathetic little man, you'll get nothing." They saw it as a desperate harassment suit. They thought their expensive lawyer could tie it up in court for years, bleed me dry of legal fees they assumed I didn't have, and eventually have it dismissed. They were fighting the battle they could see. What they couldn't see was the second envelope. While they were busy strategizing with their legal team, I was sealing a package. It was a work of art, my Mona Lisa of financial ruin. It contained copies of Mark's 2 sets of books, a detailed flowchart of his money laundering scheme using his parents' bank accounts, property deeds showing the fraudulent transfers, and my sworn affidavit. The centerpiece, however, was 20 pages of printouts from their family group chat, with the most incriminating lines highlighted in yellow. Their own words, laughing about tax evasion and mocking the gullible fool who paid for it all. I addressed one copy to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division and another to the state's white-collar crime task force. I sent them via a secure courier with no return address. They had no idea. As they prepared for a civil lawsuit, they were confident they could win. A far more dangerous storm was gathering, one that no lawyer could stop and no amount of money could make go away. They thought they were fighting a fly, not realizing the entire building was about to be condemned. For 3 weeks, the only activity was on the civil front. Their lawyer, as predicted, filed a motion to dismiss my lawsuit, calling it a vexatious and frivolous claim from a disgruntled ex-husband. Mark posted a picture of himself on a golf course, captioning it, "Some people just can't handle success. Living rent-free in your head." They were confident, basking in their perceived superiority, completely oblivious to the gears of federal justice grinding away in the background. They were so busy watching the front door for a threat they had already dismissed, they never thought to check the roof. The IRS doesn't send warnings. They don't call ahead. They just arrive. It happened on a Tuesday morning. A team of agents from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, clad in navy blue windbreakers with bold yellow letters, simultaneously executed search warrants at the offices of Prestige Homes, Mark's house, and the quiet suburban home of his parents. It was swift and brutally efficient. Employees at Mark's office could only watch in stunned silence as agents systematically boxed up every computer, every file cabinet, every single piece of paper. Mark reportedly tried to intervene, puffing his chest out and demanding to speak to his lawyer, only to be told in no uncertain terms to sit down and stay out of the way. At his parents' house, neighbors watched from behind their curtains as agents carried out boxes of financial records David and Carol had stored in their garage, records that tied them directly to the money laundering scheme. The immediate effect was catastrophic. Within hours, every bank account associated with Mark, his parents, and his business was frozen pending the criminal investigation. The multi-million-dollar credit line for the condo project was instantly suspended by the bank. The river of money that had fueled their lavish lifestyle for 2 decades was turned off at the source. Construction on the half-finished building stopped dead. Subcontractors weren't paid. Workers were sent home. The steel skeleton on the skyline became a monument to their hubris, rusting in the open air. Their entire world had been put on hold by a single court order. They were trapped. Their fancy lawyer, who specialized in civil litigation, was useless. He told them bluntly that this was out of his league. They were facing serious federal charges, including tax evasion and conspiracy to defraud the United States. The evidence, he said, must have been airtight for the government to move this fast. Late that night, my phone finally rang. It was Sarah. Her voice was unrecognizable, a thin, terrified whisper. "Alex, the IRS. They took everything. Mark's business is gone." "What did you do?" I let her question hang in the air for a moment, savoring the sound of her ragged breathing. "What did you do, Alex?" she repeated, her voice cracking. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city lights. "I did my job, Sarah," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "I'm an accountant. I saw a set of books that didn't balance, and I balanced them. For 20 years, your family has been engaged in a criminal conspiracy. You committed tax fraud, you laundered money, and you did it all using my parents' legacy as your startup fund. All I did was gather the evidence and give it to the people whose job it is to care about such things." There was a long silence on the other end, then a choked sob. "Evidence? What evidence?" "Oh, it was quite a lot," I continued, my tone conversational. "The fraudulent property transfers, the secret bank accounts, the 2 sets of books Mark kept. He's very sloppy, you know. But the best evidence? The part I think the investigators will enjoy the most was your group chat. It really ties the whole conspiracy together, especially the parts where you all discuss hiding assets from me and joke about my inheritance. I believe my favorite was your plan to cash out of our marriage once Mark closed the deal on the lake house. You called me Mr. Safety Net. Well, the net is gone, Sarah." I could hear her hyperventilating now. The tough, condescending woman who had dismissed me a few weeks earlier was gone, replaced by a terrified child. "Alex, please," she begged, her voice wet with tears. "We can fix this. I'll talk to them. We can pay you back. We had something good once, remember? Please don't do this to my family." A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Your family? You mean the people who called me a gullible fool in writing? The ones who celebrated cutting dead weight from their lives? That family?" I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a cold, hard whisper. "The man you divorced doesn't exist anymore, Sarah. He was a character I played for 20 years, a role you all cast me in. The real me is the man who keeps the promise he made to his dying mother. And I promised her I would build my own life, and that I would never let anyone take what was mine." "This isn't just about the money anymore," I said, delivering the final blow. "It's about the bill coming due. And by the way, my civil suit for the $116 million is still moving forward. With all your assets frozen by the federal government, you have no way to fight it. So when the government is done with your family, I'll be there to take whatever is left. That includes your parents' house, which, according to the records, was purchased with funds illegally diverted from the business. I'm going to take everything. This isn't the end, Sarah. For you, this is just the beginning." I hung up the phone and blocked her number. There was nothing more to say. The months that followed were a cascade of predictable consequences. Faced with an ironclad case against him, bolstered by his own idiotic bragging in the group chat, Mark took a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence. He was convicted of tax evasion and conspiracy and is currently serving a 7-year sentence in a federal correctional facility. Prestige Homes was liquidated by the government to pay off a fraction of the back taxes and penalties he owed. His parents, David and Carol, were also charged. Their lawyer managed to get them probation due to their age and cooperation, but their part in the conspiracy was made public. My civil suit went uncontested. The court granted me a default judgment for the full $116 million. To satisfy part of that judgment, their house, the very house where they plotted my exploitation over Sunday dinners, was seized and sold at auction. They now live in a small government-subsidized apartment on the bad side of town, their golden years tarnished by criminal records and shame. About a year after the raid, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Sarah. Her message was a long, rambling paragraph of regret and desperation. She wrote about how sorry she was, how she never understood, how she was a victim of her family's ambition. She said she still loved me and begged me for another chance, or if not that, just a little money to help her get back on her feet. More messages followed, each one more frantic than the last. That's when I found myself back in the moment where this story began, sitting in my office, watching her pleas fill my screen. I knew I had to end it, once and for all. I scrolled through my saved photos until I found the one I was looking for, the screenshot of her social media post, the picture of her and her family celebrating. I attached it to a new message. Beneath it, I typed 7 simple words, the final heartbreaking text. You already got your new beginning. I hit send, then I deleted her contact information for good and blocked the number. I turned back to my window, looked out at the city that was now mine, and felt the weight of 20 years finally lift. I was free.